Hello everybody and welcome to the Droidcon Italy. I'm Claudio from the Android Subito team. We are proud to be one of the prime sponsors of the event. We are waiting for you to join our speech and our virtual stand. Thank you so much and enjoy the conference.
You can start.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my session, Flutter, the Wizards of Widgets. I'm Kamal. I'm a Google developer expert in Flutter and Dart, a YouTuber, and a mentor. So today's session is not going to be the session where I know Flutter, I know how to build UI. It's not going to be a session like that. We know that every day we have a lot of good features coming up, but there's this basic factor which people really forget. That is the underlying layer, which is like the render, the elementary, the widgets. How are these widgets created in the background? They look really beautiful when I look at the widget part. So today we're going to see all those nitty gritty factors and what are the latest release, and you can make use of it while you are developing Flutter. So if you're very new to Flutter, the first few slides must be really interesting to know about it. If you already started Flutter, it would be a kind of a refresher. And then we would dive deep into about what is state, which is one of the major contributing factor in Flutter, because everything is a state. And then we will get into widgets, elementary. So the sequence or the order in which I've mentioned is how things are getting created in the background. So you have widgets and then elementary, then you have render object, custom widgets. So when will I really use a custom widget? What happens in the background when I use a custom widgets? And there are also some special widget collections. And then a Flutter latest version. Okay, so we're going to see all this and we'll see how we can use or give it a try to see what Flutter is all about. So Flutter. So Flutter is this Google's UI toolkit for building this awesome, beautiful, natively compiled applications for mobile, web, desktop, and embedded device. Yes, you heard me right. It's just not for mobile, it's for web, desktop, embedded devices from a single code base. What else can you expect? So one code base is enough to satisfy all these platforms for me. So that's what Flutter is. So if I have to talk about the beauty about Flutter, there are a lot of factors, but these are these predominant factors that I would say Flutter really stands out in the market when compared to the rest of the framework. So first one being the Flutter being the cross-platform. So it's possible to, this cross-platform is possible only if this tool has special widgets and unique design, okay, that make it capable enough to develop the same app and cater to different platform. So that is the beauty of the cross-platform. Now, when I say beautiful and expressive, am I talking about the UI part or the design factor, which is all about Flutter? No, I'm talking about this underlying framework, actually. When I say beautiful, I'm talking about the framework, where it has this layered architecture, which gives you a control of every pixel on the screen. Then definitely native access. It is easy to utilize existing Java or Kotlin or Objective-C code, and thus all your native features and your SDK on Android and iOS is unified app development. Even Flutter allows mobile app developer with little or no knowledge so that you can get started with it without even having to get deep into the Flutter development. So with the existing leverage knowledge like C or Objective, you can still invest and start with Flutter. Flutter being free and open source is one of the biggest advantages that I would say being in the Flutter community. So it supports web, you have Dart. Every day we have like almost 24,000 issues are getting merged, 17,000 pull requests, 765 contributors. So without you guys, developers, things wouldn't have been possible. You have a concern, we have things getting solved. So it is at that rate Flutter is getting updated, resolved, merged, pull request, and even solved. And also we had latest few more releases, which I would get deep into the later slides. But now, as of now, just to give you a gist of it, we have the null safety, we have Google mobile ads to beta. Um, and also not forgetting the iOS, we also have a lot of updated feature for the iOS customers, like Cupertino search text field, the same look and feel, the form section, and also the form field row. So if you try out the Cupertino part, you will really get the same look and feel as an iOS developer. And Flutter is really fast. Now, when I say fast, do I have a number how fast it is when compared to the other framework? No, it is, I'm talking about the powered, same hardware accelerated Skia 2D graphics engine, which is underpins the Chrome and Android browsers. So that is the same graphics library that we have for Flutter. It's well architected. Trust me, when I say Flutter framework, you should definitely have a look into the framework part. That is in itself is an entire section where it is architected in such a way that it supports glitch-free, jank-free graphics at a native speed of your device. And it has this huge collection of widget library, awesome special widgets. And it's kind of saves developer time. At the end of the day, as a developer, I don't want to kind of reinvent the wheel, right? So I'm looking for this rich collection of beautiful widget so that I can easily use them in my app development. So these are a few things that I could really highlight about Flutter. And as of October 2021, Flutter has become one of the most popular cross-platform mobile framework used by global developers. So if you look at the chart, this is by the Statista, 2021 October, you can see that Flutter is performing at a faster rate. And it's been predicted, and it has been actually, in fact, when it was predicted in 2018, 2020, we used to have 24.5 million software developers worldwide. And the number is to be expectedly growing in the coming years. It's because of the rise of app and web development in the growing digital age. So you can see that why am I showing you all these graphs or statistic is, as a developer, it's not just that you know what your technical aspects is, finish your work, you're done for the day. No, you should know how your framework is functioning in the market. Because if you have a client who's kind of comparing with a different framework, you should be in a position to kind of justify him or her as to why your framework is the best one to choose, and to tell, I'm choosing this for so and so reason. So always keep your eyes open, or keep an eye on these kind of statistics or some kind of new features that's happening in that particular technology or Flutter that you're learning on. All right, so moving on to the first thing. So when I say widget, even before widget, there's something called as state. So we know that Flutter is declarative. And what does this really means? So when I say Flutter is declarative, it means the Flutter builds its user interface to reflect the current state of your app. Simple as that. So let's break it down a little more further. So when I say declarative, the focus is more on the desired output or the result, right? To cite you with an example, let's say you have a switch in your app, which is like either daylight mode or morning mode or something like that. You have a switch in your app. Now, when you change the switch, you're kind of toggling it, right, between the dark theme and the light theme, right? Well, then you change the state. That kind of triggers and redraws the entire user interface, right? But if you look at visually, it's just a switch and something is happening in the background. So there is no imperative changes of the UI itself, like the widget set text. You're not doing anything as such. You are changing the state, and the UI rebuilds from scratch. So what are the pros of it by using declarative? Why use declarative is mainly for the reusability. So there is only one code path for any state of the UI. You describe what the UI should look like for any given state once, and that's it. So that's the importance of state, and which is one of the basic foundation factor in Flutter. And this formula is like the formula when you start building and when you really understand what state is all about. So Flutter being declarative, this is the formula that you need to understand. So when I say the state of the app changes, You change the state and that triggers the current state of an app. So you change the state and the UI rebuilds from scratch. So the basic example they take is the counter app. So the moment I click on the plus, the counter increases. When I click on minus, the counter decreases, right? So what exactly is happening? So the moment I press on the plus icon or the add icon, the UI is kind of redrawn. And it's so fast, the framework is handling it at that rate, the entire UI is redrawn and the state changes. So the moment the state changes, the text, everything gets changed. And it looks as though you pressing the button or you clicking the button, the text is changing. It's like calling a function with the state as the input, which is the green color, state as the input, and the UI, which is getting redrawn, is the output. So Flutter actually calls this function whenever you rebuild a widget. So the moment I say you're rebuilding a widget, this is what is happening in the background. This formula is being triggered. So your state is the input and your UI is getting redrawn and getting reflected on your mobile or whatever device or whatever platform. So this is the basic understanding of Flutter, which still a lot of Flutter developers do not get it right. All they say is, okay, I know what is stateless, what is stateful, but when you ask them what is really happening in the background, they don't know about it. So there is something called as ephemeral state as well. So all we knew was stateless and stateful object state. What is ephemeral state? I would like to ask you a question. Maybe we can think about it. Do you really manage all the state in your app, like say texture, those kind of things? Do you really handle it? No, right? You handle only the click of the button or sliding or carousel, these kind of things. Now, who handles all these other aspects of the state of your app? Definitely not the framework, right? So there are few state that you manage yourself, and there are bifurcated into two things. One is this ephemeral state, another one is the app state. So ephemeral state is something can be implemented using state and set state. And it's often like the local to a single object, widget, I would say, right? So to cite you with an example, say ephemeral state is like a local state, which I already discussed. It's confined only to one widget. So do I need a state management technique to manage the state? Definitely not necessary, because a simple set state is more than enough to handle it. Now, say for example, I have data everywhere. Now, who needs this in a particular widget is like, say for example, I have a bottom navigation bar, as you see on the screen. Now, you know that currently the selected icon tab, I just want only that data in one particular screen. Do you think this data is going to be available throughout my app? Definitely not. So in those cases, you use a ephemeral state. And do you think I would use something like an index variable or any other part of the app? I don't think so. So this bottom bar is only on my home dashboard, and it's very confined to that one single page. So in those cases, you keep your data confined and put it as local. You tag it as local. You say it as only confined to one widget. And that's when you really use a ephemeral state. Now, moving on to the other part of your state, which is the app state. As I mentioned, we are managing the state. It can be either categorized as ephemeral state or app state. We've already seen what is an ephemeral state. Now let's see what's this app state all about. So when you use, how is it different from your ephemeral state? So again, coming back to the same point that we have a data and we want to share the data across the app, like the global state. So the ephemeral was the local state and the app state is like the global state or the shared state. Sometimes you want to keep between use sessions also, like the notification, which is like available on every screen or every time you toggle, navigate, it remains the same. Or for example, you have a shopping cart, you add items, irrespective of which screen you move, you still have that state available on the screen, right? On that particular cart item. So those kind of data has been managed by the app state. Or in my previous example, I had stated the current selected tab. If you would like to take that, it's assigned to an index, which is the ephemeral state, right? What if there is a notification icon in my bottom navigation bar? So in that case, I cannot use this as an ephemeral state, right? Because that notification is going to remain constant and it'll keep updating throughout my app. So in that case, what I would use a app state. So as a developer, you need to judge your situation as to what to be used. Why am I using this? So this boils down to one point. You will have to decide it, right? So think about next time when you build a Flutter app or some functionality, think whether this would be a ephemeral state or an app state and judge and then take a call on it. I have this very interesting scenario. So the first, it's a very simple counter. We say that set state, and the moment the function gets rebuilt, the counter increases and it rebuilds your UI. So if you kind of compare these two code, you just let me know if you really find any difference? Because we can update a variable first. So what exactly is happening is we can update a variable first and then call a set function. A set state is just to inform the underlying framework that they update this widget. That is what set state is all about. In the next framework, it kind of makes it dirty, right? So the underlying framework will use the last value that is defined before calling the set state function. And then it comes to a question like when to use set state then. We don't need a call set state every time we change a variable. We call a set state only we want to change in the variable to reflect on the UI of the screen. That is also another incorrect preconceived notion people have using set state. They call it whenever they want to change a variable. No, don't use it set state for that. Use it if you want to change a variable to reflect on the UI of the screen. That's when you use a set state. So this is one good example to try it out. Use both the ways and it will still work. So then what is the point in it? So whatever I've discussed will kind of make sense to you. Now coming to the widgets. I know I would say widgets are like this basic building blocks, but for me, the building blocks prior to widgets also is state, because everything revolves with widgets and state itself, right? So that's when the state management concept comes into picture. So widgets are this basic building blocks of Flutter app user interface, and each widget is immutable declaration, part of your user interface. Widgets kind of form this hierarchy based on composition. They form this tree structure. So the moment you start with the scaffold, center, column, children, text widget, icons, so it forms that tree structures when you're doing it. So in Flutter, widgets are used to declare and construct UI. So widget is just not a piece of UI, if you ask me. It's more than that. It's a lot more than that. More than like a structural element like a slider, text, image, list, or a button. So if I have to say in a simple layman terms, I can say widget is the blueprint. Flutter uses this blueprint to create views, because always we use this scenario of saying blueprint, right? So in Flutter, if I have to say, so widgets are the blueprint, and I use this blueprint to create views. So as I mentioned in my previous note, it is about the tree structure, right? So I know what is widget. We use it everywhere whenever you develop a Flutter application. Now let's see what are the types of widget and based on what are these getting categorized. So always when we start a Flutter project, we say either this particular widget is going to be stateless or it's going to be a stateful. Now, always we should have this judging factor, decision-making power has to, why have to define this as stateless? Why not stateful? Maybe in the future, it might get into a stateful widget. So you'll always have to pose this question before you declare something. I know it's very easy to change a widget from stateless to stateful by just a right click, but that's not the intention of defining or discussing about it. You need to really understand in future, will this be converted into stateful? And what are the things that would be affecting factors of it? So if I have to say, let's start with a stateless, which is very simple. That means it does not have state. And this is how you define a stateless widget. So you can see that I have my app, which kind of extends stateless widget. So this is a stateless one, and it has nothing much, just a build. So which contains a constructor and a build method, simple. And this build method is the one that just returns one or more widgets, simple. So it does not hold any data. It does not reflect any data. So if I want something to just display directly, I just go for a stateless widget. It's like something like an headless. just display it, because nothing is going to be changing, nothing is dynamic here. So those kind of widgets, we would go for a stateless. Now, if you ask me what are a little more in depth, if a widget does not do anything, it's stateless. They are static in nature. They do not store any real-time data. All they have is a constructor, a build method, which is returning one or more widgets. So if I have to say example like your icon, so as an icon, if I'm defining an icon in my application, all I have to do is just display it. Am I going to do anything with the icon? That is a secondary aspect. But icon as itself, is it going to do something? No, it's not going to change. It's going to remain static for me. Button, only when I press, it's going to do something for me or click on it. Text is just a text, simple text. I can make these kind of widgets all as stateless widgets. One such example from my projects that I built. So if you look at this, it's a simple dashboard where you have a sales for the month for a particular product or a company. So all this remains static for me if I'm going to develop this. But if you ask me, the values over here might be dynamic. So those things, I would put it as a stateful because it's going to change. But say, for example, sales of the month, or the quarterly, the titles, or few other aspects which remain like read more, click here, those things will remain constant. So it's not going to change, right? So I can define this entire thing as stateless. Similar way, I have an app which kind of displays a plan, a monthly plan, a standard plan, or a plus. So it's going to just display some text values with few check or whether it's been applicable or not. So if these kind of things, I don't have to use a stateful because it's not going to give me any data, right? Unless I click on the choose plan, which is going to do some kind of function, it's going to be stateless for me. So we have seen what is a stateless widget, right? Now let's see what's a stateful widget. So is it something like, is it going to be full? Is it mutable? Yes. Stateful widget is mutable, and that's why it can be drawn multiple times within a lifetime. So stateful widgets are dynamic in nature, and that means it can keep track of your changes, update the UI based on these changes. So it just does not have a container or something like that. It also has something called create state. But if you see at the stateless, we just had a constructor and a build, which was returning a widget. But here we have something called create state. What is it exactly the create state does? So instead of overriding the build method, you need to override the create state method. Here, the create state method returns a state object. So that is why I was stressing so much on the state aspect, because in Flutter, you deal with state. So more than widgets, before we need to go one layer below or one layer beneath to understand what a state is all about. So that's when we spoke about a formal state, app state, judge, and then use it. This is one such example from my project again, where I've used stateful widgets. Now, say for example, I have clicked on the favorite icon. If you consider the taxi app, where I'm kind of telling this particular transportation is my favorite, and the moment I click on the bottom navigation bar, the favorite icons, I get the list of my favorite. So here we are storing a state of that particular item, and then we are displaying it in a separate tab. So here I cannot use a stateless. I will have to use a stateful widget. Similarly, like the clone of the Google Play app, where you've been navigating from one tab to another, or if you kind of put a favorite one or purchased or installed apps, it keeps a track of these apps, right? So those would be a stateful objects if you have to define one in real life example. So these are a couple of real life scenarios where you would use a stateful widget. All right, so moving on to the life cycle. This is another aspect which people, as a developer, they do not really go through it. So I think it's very important to understand the life cycle part as well. So if you're from an Android background or any other tech platform, definitely that is the first concept everybody would teach you. What is the life cycle of a particular Android, or what happens when you create, build, destroy, all this. So it usually happens in a linear mode, one after another at each stage is completed, right? So we know what widgets are, how to categorize them, we know what is app state. Now let's see about the life cycle of widgets. So first one is the create state. So when the Flutter is instructed to build a stateful object, immediately this state is being called and mounted as true. So when the create state the create state kind of creates a state class, a build context, and it is assigned to that particular state. It does its jobs. That's it. All widgets have a bool property. It turns true when the build context is assigned. And if there is an error to call the set state, the widgets are kind of unmounted. So this all happens in the background when I kind of use that create state. Init state, I'm sure init state is a very common thing. It's the kind of the first state that is being called when a widget is created, and it's called only once. That's it. So where you can do initializing of data, you can initialize properties, subscribe for streams, change notifier, any other objects that could change the data of this widget. And we also have something called did change dependency. It's kind of a method which is called immediately after your init state on the first time when the widget is built. Did you ever think about that? This is called did change dependency. Give it a try if you haven't done one. Built. It is required. It is mandatory to return a widget. Did update widget. Now these methods all are used to find out if your widget exists or not sometimes. It's really handy actually. So it's called when the widget configuration changes. So you might have to check if does this widget really exist in my app or not. Try using all this to see. It gives you a clear understanding of it. Set state, notify your framework that data has been changed, and that helps you to rebuild your UI. Deactivate. This is very rarely used. It's called when the state is removed from the tree. So that also happens, and this method is called dispose. It's called when your state object is removed, which is permanent. Mounted. It tells about the availability of the widget. So whenever you use the factor mounted, that means you're checking if your widget is available or not. So if you always you've kind of stuck to this one thing called build set state, it's not enough. Try exploring all these functions of the life cycle. Now coming to the widget tree. Let's say what really happens in the background. Okay, now I have to create a simple increment counter. I draw these icons, I display a text. I'm happy about it. I get the output. But really in the background, what happens? So first thing we have is this widget tree. So if I have to explain it like kind of zoom it like 2 to 3 levels below it, this is what really happens. So you have learned that widget contains the instructions to create a UI, and when you compose nested widgets together, they create a widget tree. So as I told you, scaffold, column, children, then text, icon, all that. So the Flutter framework uses this widget as a configuration for each element that is mounted or rendered on the screen. The mounted element is displayed on the the mounted element is kind of displayed on the screen, and it creates the element tree. So the moment I create a widget, immediately an element tree is created. We have 2 trees more. And the widget tree that has the widget configuration and the element tree that represents the rendered widget on the screen. So the moment I create a widget, element tree creates, and then render object creates, which is a render tree. Now we know what widget does. Now what really element does and what really a render object does. Why do we require these 2 trees? So we'll have a look into it. So if you have to look at how the tree structure is happening, so if you look here, scaffold being the main, and then you have center, column, children, 2 text, and then a floating button. This looks absolutely fine when I look at it. But if I have to look at it as a tree structure, this is how it looks like. So I have my app, my material app, my home screen, scaffold, and I have 3 components. One is the app bar, center, floating button. Inside my floating button, I have an icon, and inside my app bar, I have a text, a center, which again is the parent of a column widget. And then the column has like two components, which is the text1 and text2. This looks absolutely fine when I look at the app, look at the code. But as I told you, we have to go 2 layers below to see what is the elementary and what is the render object. So several widgets combined under stateless widgets will be called as stateless, right? And the corresponding elements will make an elementary. Now Flutter uses this create element method to create the elements. This is the one actually creates that elementary. Now each element is created will have a unique ID assigned by the Flutter in the backend, right? So if I have to scan or zoom in one more layer below, this is what I see. I don't see center, column, text, icon, floating button. All I see, whether it's a stateless or a stateful widget, this is how this elementary looks like. So it's a stateless element. And if there was a stateful, it will definitely display that as stateful one. So this is how you will have to scan and look into it. And we do have a lot of widgets on your IDE, which can help you focus or look into these aspects of your code. So render object. So when you create a widget, we have a widget tree, simple. Then Flutter creates another tree, which is the element tree. And what does this element tree does? It creates another render object called as render tree. So if you look at the framework of Flutter, so first you have a widget. That is where we all concentrate most of the time. We are done with the app, good to go. But there is this one more layer beneath it, which is called as a rendering layer. So what do the render object do? They lay out, they paint, hit testing, or accessibility. So we know everything is a widget in Flutter, but it is also true that everything is a render object as well in the background. So most of the Flutter widget uses a render box. So most of the render object can be reused to improve performance. Say for example, I have a widget whose color is being changed, say from blue to green. Then what really happens is that if there is the same object attached to it, then I'm going to just reuse it and repaint it. That's by increasing the performance. That is the job of this render object. But if it gets swapped or removed or moved to a different part of the tree, the thing is different. But you remember we used to have this hot reload. The moment you do something and click on hot reload, immediately the things are reflecting on our app. How is that happening? This is the one that is actually helping us. Because if it finds the same object ID, it just reuses it and repaints it. So it's not building a new one. Building one takes time, right? So that's the best and the beauty about the Flutter framework. So now you must have a good understanding what this render object is all about, right? So when you look one level deep again, you will find there's a column, scaffold, or icons, all are kind of render objects there. It's no more like a widgets. So we've been talking about a lot of widgets we use. Sometimes you will have to go with custom widgets because there is no other option. Yeah, definitely there are a lot of resources, but you are confined to use them. But you would have requests from your customers to create a custom one to make it more effective, readable, reusability. So those kind of factors, when it comes, definitely you will need a reusable or a custom widget. So say, for example, if you look at the second app, which is the Harry Potter, that kind of a widget where I have one overlapping the other one, two boxes, where would I find a widget like that? I'll have to create one, right? Similarly, the dashboard with the total views, bookmark, notification. If you look, I have the same pattern being followed, but the only thing is the color, the text, the icon changes. The rest all remains the same. Why would I create multiple widgets using it? I would create a custom widget and pass parameters with these values. Similarly, if you see the Bitcoin or the kind of list view kind of app, you can see that there's this icon, the text, the graph, and the value, but the rest all remains the same. So here also I would use a custom widget. And the last one being the social icons, all I see is the icon change, the link will change, the color remains the same. So why would I create 4 widgets? Instead, I would create one custom widget and add them as a parameter. So we're going to see those example now, how to create that. So always I try to visualize when I create Flutter widgets as a tree structure, because it is a tree structure indeed. As I told you, it's like the elementary render object. So if you look at it, I have elements next to each other in a row. So I would say row social icon widget. That's the custom widget I'm using. So I need 4 of them. Now let's define this social icon widget. So I have some padding, I have some inkwell, material, circle border, icon, color. I'm good to go. So if this is how it looks like, the code, if you see, this is how it looks. So as I told you, row, padding, inkwell, material, circle border, padding, font. So when I do this, I get this. Absolutely fine, happy. This is what I was looking for. And I'm good to go. But if I use a row widget with all of these 4 things, like social icon widgets, when I actually get the output, it is actually 4 similar icons. Why is that? That is because we were using it same as constant text. The text wasn't changing in this case. So how do we tackle the situation? So that's when we kind of add parameters to the constructor or the custom widgets. We say icon value, and then we say URL if needed. In my case, I haven't given, so just the icon changes. So now what I do is I kind of give the icon value as the input, and then I give the icon value as the parameter to my icon widget. Now, if I do this, then I would be able to get different icon based on whether it's a row or a column. So that's how simple or handy custom widgets are. So if you are building a custom widget, try to make the maximum utilization of it and the better use of it, rather than building a same widget and making it the more lengthier and unreadable kind of a code. Now, coming to the widget collections, we have definitely a different types of widget. You think about a particular use case, we have widgets. So we have accessibility, input, text, scrolling, painting, layouts. So row, the moment I say row, column widget, they all come under layouts. They say text, accessibility, styling, themes, async, assets, image, icons. So you can look into the Flutter dev docs. You can find all these widget collections. Inside this, you would find material components. You would find all the widgets. So animation, motion, all Cupertino widgets as well. So these are a couple of widgets that I could think of it, but definitely there are tons of it. You can have a look into it. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, okay, we really know what Flutter is. We know it's all about state, widget, what really happens in the elementary render object. But I think as a Flutter developer, as I mentioned in the earlier slides, it's always good to understand how your framework performs in the market. Have a good understanding of it, so that you're good enough to kind of advocate to someone if someone asks you about Flutter, or what is the things happening, and you can come up with these ideas. So every month, every couple of weeks, we do have releases happening, and most of the issues get resolved in that. I've been working on so many of the apps where I see most of the people, they kind of stumble upon so many factors just because they don't read the release updates. They would have resolved it in the release, or they would have given you an alternative solution, but people still use that old school style of using the old updates. So try to keep yourself updated with the release, subscribe to it, and you're good to know what are the latest updates. So one such update is this reorderable list view. Now has a grab handle for easy to drag and drop with a mouse. Think if I did not have this update, I would have to do it everything by scratch, from scratch, do these things. So dragging was a major concern initially, but now we have a particular widget to do this. It's called the reorderable list view. All I have to do is add it and I'm good to go. So that's how Flutter is listening to the developers' user needs and working on it. So give it a try if you haven't tried one. And just a couple of days back, 2 days back, I think Firebase announced the support for its Flutter SDK in Dartpad. So if you haven't heard about Dartpad, it's an online editor to write your Flutter applications. So you don't need an IDE to install and start doing it. You have an online browser, just open the Dartpad and you're good to go to write Flutter applications. And also you have a side-by-side emulator, which is kind of uh, displays your results as well. So this is something that provides a lot of opportunity and will definitely make it easier to experiment Firebase and Flutter. Now, if I have to include a database in my app, I don't even have to use an IDE. All I have to do is set up the console in the backend with few setup instructions and add those keys here, and I'm good to go to use Firebase online in the browser on my Dartpad. What more can we expect from Flutter? So give it a try. It's the Dartpad, and you can create applications now using Firebase. Also, you want to try a simple login, you can do it. And yeah, this is about the latest update that we have. And definitely, if I have to talk to someone about Firebase and Flutter, I don't have to use my system. I have a browser, I can directly show them the functionalities and explore the features. We also had Google Mobile Ads SDK for Flutter. This is the brand new plugin that provides inline banner and native ads, in addition to the existing overlay formats like overlay banner, interterrestrial, and the reward video ads. Like these plugin unifies support for ad managers and ad mob. So no matter what size publishers you are, this plugin can be tailored to your scenario. So do check out if you're using one. So based on your scenarios, you can tailor them, and whatever size you can publish, it doesn't matter. We also have this navigation rail. See, these kind of features, I would definitely like to add it in my app. And would I try building it from scratch, or would I use already existing ones? Definitely, I would use the existing one, right? So say, for example, I'm navigating from a mobile to a desktop. From mobile, it looks here. When a desktop, it looks in the horizontal fashion, right? So I would definitely use these kind of widgets. It's called the navigation rail. And then we have the motion. Why wouldn't I use these kind of transitions or patterns in my app? It looks so neat, clean to use it as well. And it looks so sophisticated that people would think, oh, you know what, it's got great animation. But trust me, it's just components with few transitions, that's it. And it's like shared axis, fade through, fade in. And it's very easier to implement. All you have to do is just drag and drop, and you can delight your customer with this UI, thinking that you're building some fancy app. And that's how Flutter is kind of delighting us. Google Fonts. I remember the days where back where I have to use fonts, I have to download the package, use them. But trust me, in Flutter, it's made it really easy. Allow developers to easily implement, experiment with it, use any of the fonts from the googlefonts.com in your app. When the app is ready to publish, the developer it decides whether the user receive the font by downloading it, or from the API, or the pre-bundled app package. So that's how easy it is to use Google Fonts in your Flutter app. You can see the beauty of it as well instantly. And then we have this interactive view widget that kind of enables you to quickly, easily add 2D panning and zooming to any widget tree in your app. So we used to have this calendar. All I need is that select from a particular date to from. So I could do that, add details, because these are very important things in these days app. So you have a booking app, you definitely need a calendar. So Flutter gives you all this in the form of widget. Use it and then modify, customize, use them. So still people do not know about it, and they kind of do the old school style of rebuilding it. And then we had few differences, like just to show you the difference between Flutter 1.2 and 2.0, you could see that janky effect when you're trying to close the keyboard. You could see how neat it is on 1.22, and 1.2, you can see still that overlay of it, right? So these were the minor changes. I know it's a very small change, but trust me, when you're actually using this, it is really useful. And also we had this autocomplete feature, which was the minimal functionality required to get autocomplete function in your Flutter app. It was also one of the requested feature, and we have it now. So definitely something that I would use it in my Flutter app going forward. And Dart dev tools. Tell me, when you're developing an applications, if you're from a web background, you would have this console where you can inspect network and all. Now for a Flutter app, how would I do that? So we have an exclusively inbuilt Dart dev tool. The moment you run your Flutter application, it gets popped up and it shows you all the details, whether it could be inspecting a particular widget or finding out the memory or performance or even the network. If you're making some API calls and want to find out the general header information or the traffic, you want to record it or pause and see the network data logging, you can do all kind of things on this Dart dev tool. So that is entirely a different world of Dart, and where you can explore a lot of things. So if you haven't started using Dart dev tools, please use it, explore it, and you would love to debug your app using it, and it is a must. And yeah, I've been talking about a lot about Flutter, right? So what survey, we always also look at the survey results, like what is your primary purpose of using Flutter? So when we actually really asked people about it, and it's been pulled up from a lot of Flutter resources and Flutter team, we find that most of them kind of use it for part of their main job actually. And there are few who use it like for the personal projects, experimenting the ideas. So you need to know Flutter. When you say I'm a Flutter developer, I'm developing Flutter for so many clients, now there might be a few questions posed at you asking how many people, how many companies are using, or what do they really use Flutter for. So there are few people who use it to expand their skill set, and also potentially evaluating if it could be used in the production. So you can see the amount of people using from Q3, I mean 2020 to 2021, how drastically it has been increasing, that they are using it in most of the production and as a main job. So a lot of companies have been adopting Flutter as part of their main job as well. So I'm going to freeze the screen for a second so that these are the references, or I leave the slide, you can find out it. So I go just with flutter.dev, dart.dev, medium Flutter. So these are the articles that I refer for the updates. And yes, we have an interesting group called Flutterista, where it's kind of a woman or a non-binary. If you basically, it's a community for us. If you're interested in Flutter, you can be a part of it. So we have this community run by two amazing Flutterista, who's Danielle and Stephanie. So if you want to be a part of it, where we have regular meet with the Google team, and all over the world, all the Flutter developers join there, discuss about projects, events, resources, handling project queries, everything is happening. So if you want to get connected to this group, just leave me a comment or ping me on chat, or after this we can take it up and I'll help you get you connected with it. We also have a lot of meetup groups happening in your local city. Get connected with them to understand the latest updates. And we also have on Twitter, Reddit, LinkedIn, we have Flutter groups. So join as well to understand how Flutter could be used and make your work more efficient and use them in your day-to-day life. And yeah, that's it. I think I'm almost done for the session. So I think by now, as a Flutter developer, you might have at least given a feel that, yes, I have to know something about render object. Even though I've not covered too much about it, a gist of it, definitely there's a lot of things to explore about it. Find out what really happens in the background when you create a widget, the element tree, and also how the latest release is going to help you develop your apps, make it more efficient, up to date with the stable version, use new features, and make your Flutter app amazing and delight your customer. Thank you so much. And you can get connected with me on all these social media icons. Thank you so much.